statement. Exodus 23:1, it says, "Do not let a false statement go further. Do not make an agreement with evil doers to be a false witness." John chapter 19, verse 19, and Pilate put on the cross, and in some translations it says a statement in writing. The writing was Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. And as I began to think about this message there today, there has been statements that has been made in our nation, whether, importantly we want biblical-based statements, but there's been statements that we know that come from all types of organisations. I want you to also think of what's just happened just recently. Out of everything that just happened last week, we had 6 of the states and 2 Northern Territories. The Northern Territory and the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory. Out of those 6 states, all said no. Out of one of those territories, Canberra was the only one that said yes. And I'm just going to go through some things. When we had the round table, the Lord had me go through the stages or the history, the timeline of reconciliation. And we've always shared on some of the things the ministry has, and I thank God for the vision that Barbara's written over a number of years. Many of those reconciliation movements that we as a ministry, the church, has been involved in, but also personally, they've become a lot of the writings of her books, even today. And but when we look at a lot of things that the Lord has done, I want you to think of this word, Makarrata. Many of you know what was the battle that was going on. It was the voice, the treaty, and the truth. And in contrast, no formal treaty has ever been signed between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the British Australian government. There are lots of different names for treaty. Sometimes a treaty is called a settlement, agreement, even that word pact, P-A-C-T, or accord, or covenant, compact, or now we hear of that term, Makarrata. If many of you have not been aware of that term or the spelling of Makarrata, it is a word in the Yolngu language meaning a coming together after a struggle, facing the facts of wrongs, and living again in peace. Or we can say shalom. But that's only one meaning of that word. So it's very, very important when you hear words that are used, and reconciliation is one of those words. It's a word that, it's biblical. It's a biblical word. And when you go back and you study scriptures, and you look at words that are printed in the newspaper, or you might hear certain words over the TV or the wireless. It's so important when you are doing word studies that you go and search deep of that understanding of that word. The second meaning of that word Makarrata, as I said, the term comes, where does it turn from? And I mentioned the Yolngu people. And one of the elders, who's an education in a school, she said in a report that this word has many layers or many meanings of it. The second one, Makarrata, literally means a spear penetrating usually the thigh of a person that has done wrong, so that they cannot hunt anymore, that they cannot walk properly, that they cannot run properly, to maim them, to settle them down, to calm them. That's Makarrata. So it has many, many layers there to it. So when you and I think, oh, it's fine. Treaty, yeah, biblical. And when I was looking at these words, I based it, Barbara and myself was basing this whole referendum. It was in 2019, that was the theme for NAIDOC, was treaty, voice and truth. That was the theme of NAIDOC. The landscape of our nation had changed, because I remember when the Lord had Barbara and myself to a school, a Catholic school, just outside of Marlborough Road. And we had 35 teachers there that day. And when we brought this message, everything has to be foundationally based, scripture based. So this is why you hear us saying, when we look at the voice, that word voice, we say as a nation, the sheep need to hear the voice of the Lord. That's the important thing. When we look at treaty, we know those things are biblical. When we look at that word truth, or they refer to truth telling, Jesus says, on the way, the truth and the life. So we brought that together in a school in 2019, but we know over the time where it is now, the landscape of many things has certainly changed. This, they call it the National Australian Conference. This word was introduced right then in the 1970s. It became conscious on a national scale. National consciousness. I've heard since 1970 that word. You might have only just started to hear the word treaty, but when it came from, when they were looking at words, they needed, the government at the time wanted to have an indigenous word. And so that came into being. So NAC, or the National Australian Conference, was established by the federal government in 1977. In 1979, the National Australian Conference recommended a treaty of commitment be extended between the Australian government and Aboriginal nations. And it was decided that a word from the indigenous language should be used for the process. Enter Makarrata. And we know that treaties in Australia, 1979, Aboriginal Treaty Committee, it was established, but it folded in 1983. So it only lasted about 4 years, this committee, 4 years. In 1988, treaty was in the spotlight. Central and Northern Land Councils presented the Barunga, B-I-R-U-N-G-A statement to the then PM Bob Hawke. We know then at that time the Hawke government had supported, but there was no agreement. The agreement was not reached. And so treaty was abandoned in favour of a policy of, now we know, reconciliation. When I was looking at this Barunga statement, it read, "We, the Indigenous owners and occupiers of Australia, call on the Australian government, people to recognise our rights to self-determination and self-management, including the freedom to pursue our own economic, social, religious and cultural development." Now this statement, Barunga statement, that to this day, 35 years old, to this day, 35 years. And so when the Lord began to just unfold some things, and as now was just recently formed Thursday night, I want to thank many of you for coming on Thursday night. I believe it was a blessing. It's the start of many, many things. But the Lord has been saying to me about this statement, what do we need to deliver as a statement for the Center for Reconciliation and Peace? Even though we've been going now for 27 years, we need to put something out there because the landscape is continually changing. And we know that there is a great divide. So that was the importance of coming together. When the Lord said, I want you to call a reconciliation roundtable, Barbara acted on that, and that's one of the things which happens. We act, when God gives us something, we just act upon it straight away. And all of a sudden we just say, Lord, will you develop a strategy? You just bring this together. And the Lord brought us that together. And so you might have heard the term square peg